live stream. And is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest in general nature thereof? None. We can now turn this meeting over to City Council.
Yeah, I don't really have too much to say other than that, right now I think everyone would have had a chance to review the financing proposal that we received on September 20th along with their presentation details. And so this is really an opportunity for council to discuss what they would like to see in a report from comparing with our municipal force versus the OPP, or Councillor Foster has provided me a list with some things to include in terms of OPP satisfaction surveys and that kind of thing. So really it's just an opportunity for council to discuss what they think is important and that they would like me to address in the report. So.
Okay.
Okay, I asked for this meeting, I'm going to pass this around. This is just some talking comments, talking points that I'm going to do for tonight. Okay. A major area I wanted us to
Do I
do.
get one?
Oh yeah, sorry, I made enough for more.
Is it the same?
Very close. There may be one or two minor changes there, but. Yeah, I brought 10 or so. I'll give you one for Tracy, Tracy one. And they're just talking points, okay? We can either agree or not agree to look at some of these things. So the first major area was what do we want to see in a savings estimate? A number of us have been following what other communities are doing, and some communities use the OPP cost model and put their data in it and they use that. Others have looked at their crime rates. Others did a sensitivity analysis and looked at what the savings might be if they were at the 80th percentile or 90th percentile or 50th percentile. So Cynthia's going to make her best judgment on what she thinks the savings are, but this becomes a little bit of a reality check if you look at it 2 or 3 different ways. The numbers aren't going to be exactly the same, but it tells you whether or not you're in the ballpark. So the first area there is calculate the savings using the cost tool, and I think that makes a lot of sense, and we've got that. I did a quick look at urban communities. You can look at a number of urban communities and see what those costs are and say, well, Espanola might be somewhere in that same region. And not looking at just rural OPP, but more urban OPP. And we can compare, look at what the savings might look like at certain levels. If we're above 95% of the communities, above 80% of the communities, I think we're going to find that we're a little higher than the average on the OPP, but at least we could do something like that.
How do you mean a little higher than the average?
I think that you look at our crime rates and you look at some of the urban communities, their typical costs are a little bit higher. But okay, but that will sort of, if you look at what other communities, urban communities are paying, and average that out and get a bit of a range on that, that gets a reality check to looking at what our calls for service are. And Cynthia's going to, I think in the final analysis, use one set of numbers, but it gives us, if we're looking at what those numbers might look like, looking at it several ways, it reinforces whether or not the numbers look realistic.
Do you think, when we're talking about calls for service, I think there's some education to residents involved with that too, because there's a lot of residents that call police when it's something else. They got, whatever, and they have a tendency, because they've always done that in this town, to call the police in, when it really isn't a police matter.
Yeah.
And so there's have to be some education there, otherwise we'll be paying for these calls that are not relevant.
Well, that's sort of the upside down the road, okay? But we have to go with the information we have here now, okay? And I think we want to have a fairly conservative estimate, okay, of what the savings are going to be, but that's just my personal opinion.
To further what you just said, the same people that answer the phones will say, if I call, do you get the 911 operator, or who do you get when you're calling? Because if you did, like, you know, these saying bogus calls that shouldn't be even brought up, right?
Yeah.
So I get charged for them. So at that point, wouldn't the 911 operator say, no, this is not for the police, or?
Well, these are normally calls that bring people out into the field, okay? A crime's been occurred of some sort. If you go and look at that in detail, it's, there's been a break and enter or an assault.
That's a crime.
Yeah, those are that's where those calls are generally generated from.
Maybe I can, since I had a couple of things here, maybe now's a good time to put these in. First of all, I'll go to the, so I don't forget, when we talk about, Bill's talked about we'll use the model and develop the cost generated across 10 years, I assume?
I think we use 3 years.
Well, we got the 3 years, yeah,
Yeah.
transition, but we need to go forward, and my
Yeah.
suggestion would have been 10 years. That seems to be what most communities have done. You and I, for sure, and I think everybody now has probably seen a lot of the other communities who have gone through this exercise. Some of them are quite good, and wonder if any of them would be worth considering using as a template. There's a couple of really good ones, as you know, that were very well done. Pardon me. And the other thing was, referring to raised question about the dispatch. A lot of these, the OPP have obviously extended the invitation for questions, and they'll provide answers. I know I put in about 30 questions. That's the kind of question to send to them. And then my question would be, shouldn't those also, once they're answered, be put up on the website where we have them? I believe I had some dispatch questions, but not your particular one.
Okay.
So for councillors, Cynthia's taking the is the clearinghouse, if you like. The OPP requested they all go through her, and she's sending them in, and I imagine the answers will come back. Does everybody think that we should put them on the website once the answers are back?
I agree with, we should.
I think so.
Yeah, there's nothing in there that would be,
Confidential.
yeah,
No.
you know, there are general questions, mostly about, very little about costing, because we need to go forward on the costing before we can really ask questions on that.
I think that's a good idea. And then the questions will be doubled.
Well, put your questions in, and Cynthia sends them in every Friday, and we've seemed to agree they should be on the website.
I think we can, there's a whole series of questions that other communities asked. We should take all those questions and see whether they apply to Espanola in any way and send them off to other get as well. So we don't need to wait for all the questions to come in. A lot of these questions have been asked in other communities, and
Right.
we can provide some of that, get the answers back, provide some of that information on the website, and that may then stimulate some other questions from the residents.
Some of them I've actually gone through a lot of them, and that's where some of mine came from, and I've twisted them where they need to be for Espanola. Others are very specific to us. So everybody should do the same. I don't ever recall seeing that kind of a question, though, Ray, on any
Okay.
community. So that's a good question, I think.
The other thing I was a little concerned about, I know North Bay does handle, it's like the hub for the calls. At least it was. Didn't matter where you were down the road, North Bay picked up. Is that gonna be the same if we were to go with the OPP here? Would that be the same
That's the
scenario?
same, that's the same. And I'm gonna cover that a little further
Oh,
down,
good.
if you don't
Sorry.
mind, okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, like, what I wanna do is at least get some agreement on what we wanna put in, ask Cynthia to include in a financial report. And I suggest we look at using the cost tool, looking at urban communities, see what their average costs are looking like, and do a bit of a sensitivity analysis at certain price points on the
When you're looking at
OPP.
urban communities, are you looking at ones that are similar in population to us? Or are you just?
Well, we can decide that. If Cynthia has a reasonable number that are close to us in population, that'll be perfect.
Yes.
Okay.
And if we're agreed on that, then we can go on to the next item that I had, and that is, we have two, I see the policing as two key issues, and that is, do we save money? And secondly, are the residents going to be satisfied with the quality of the policing? And if neither of them is acceptable, then we don't go that route. So somehow or other, we need to get some information on satisfaction and effectiveness of OPP police communities. And I'm going to suggest that we collect some scientific opinion surveys from OPP police communities and see what they're saying. And the last page at the back has a list of questions that a lot of these surveys include. And the other part of it there is we can talk to some of these communities who have switched, a number of communities, and if we were to talk to the head of the police services board or the mayor or both on some of these communities, we can find out what their opinion is, okay? I'd rather rely more on the scientific but this just reinforces it one way or another.
Sure.
And the third thing here is crime statistics, okay? How do the crime statistics in OPP communities compare to municipally policed in Espanola? Crime rates are one measure, not the only one on the effectiveness of community policing. So in reality, policing is one of the major objectives of policing is to keep the crime rates under control, minimize the crime rates. If you have crimes committed, then address them. But the main objective is to minimize the crime rates. So the Statistics Canada has on their website, you can go back and you can choose overall crime severity index, and that's a combination of the severity of the crime and the number of crimes. It's a weighted average, and I don't know how it's weighted, but it's one measure. You got violent crime severity index, I don't know, property crime. There were several categories you can look at, and we could collect. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes to select the communities and select the timeline. So you could select a 10 or 12-year period and just select a bunch of municipal communities, a bunch of OPP communities, and I would suggest that they would be more urban-based, okay? So we're not trying to compare ourselves to an area that has all small communities or more rural. And just get an idea how our crime rates compare, how the OPP compare. We could even look at some communities who've switched to the OPP and see what the crime rates did before and after. And that information is readily available in Statistics Canada, and it's just another measure of policing effective. It's not the only one, but it's just another measure of it. A third area I think we should look at is the future of policing. We're talking about the future of the community. And we know that there's some governance changes coming in the future. There's a look at the future of policing and a report on macro trends on policing and what it might mean if we had OPP service and municipal service should be done, I believe. We know that there's a next generation dispatch coming up, and that's going to be a pretty big deal. There's a trend towards cybercrime, online threats, fraud, terrorism, and there's a move towards outcome-based policing and situation tables. And there may be some implications on the crime rate. If these things, situation tables may have the potential to reduce the crime rate, and from an OPP standpoint, that may reduce the calls for service. And I guess that was it for the future of policing. Potential enhancements, we need to address, well, I guess I'll go through this and then we can discuss what we want to include, okay? Enhancements. Foot patrols is one area that most communities, if they're dissatisfied with policing, that's one area they may be dissatisfied with. And I suggest we've got a 5-year history of our foot patrols, and we have to decide what level of foot patrols we want to have in the community and whether the OPP satisfies that, because that may mean, from Cynthia's standpoint, we may need to get an enhancement there. We have, our police have supported local events, and generally they've gone out for Christmas parades and other things, okay? And we should pull up a 5-year history of that. And that information is readily available in the Police Service Board yearly operational reports. We should summarize that and really ask the OPP how they would handle that and make a decision on whether or not we need to add some additional money into the budget for that.
Okay, just
Yeah.
to get back to the local support events, is that for security?
Yeah, traffic control, security, and stuff like that.
I wonder if we could look at that in different ways. I mean, we could get the OPP to do the security, but I'm sure we could get anybody else as well.
Yeah.
The thing is, our local police are doing it, but they're doing it on shift.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's
Yeah.
already in their budget.
Yeah, I don't know whether the OPP does these types of things. We just have to ask the question. I don't think it's a real big
No, I
deal.
don't think so.
Okay, but if we want to make sure, we have to identify whether we want any extras there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, it's one of my questions that I sent in for a clear answer.
Yeah.
Although the answer was yes when I asked him
Yeah.
at the meeting.
The office hours of, the OPP are proposing one person on staff, day shift, 5 days a week, okay? And in our police station. And right now, we have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week service. I believe we should pull up the history, and we've done, for the last 2 years, we've been doing some of that history, and look to see whether or not we need to go beyond that for police hours, for police checks, or whatever. And you collect the information, and as a council, we're gonna have to make a decision on whether or not we need more money for that or not. I don't believe we do, but
No, I don't believe we do either.
but we should get the information, I believe.
It's like every other business. If the hours are available 24 hours a day, they get utilized
Yeah.
sometimes at off hours.
Yeah,
But if they're only available at certain hours, well, we suit ourselves to meet those hours.
yeah. But I think we should collect the
Yeah.
information,
Yeah.
tabulate
Make a
it,
decision.
just to support the decision.
Yep.
Yeah.
School program, 5-year history of school patrols and presentations, and make sure the OPP meets that criteria. I don't think they do.
He did say.
I don't think that they'll have a problem there because they've got a community service officer. But,
Yeah, and he did say that.
yeah,
That
but
they did.
we just need to confirm those things. Bylaw enforcement, that's an area where the OPP won't do what the existing police force is doing.
They do some, he said.
Yeah. So we need to sort that out.
Actually, my question was ties right into that. One of those things is
Was it asked
a
for?
5-year history of the foot patrol. Whoops, skip that, we did that. Bylaw infraction summary for the past 5 years. That should be available
I think it
from the
is.
police service.
Yeah, and we have to look at the type of bylaws that are being enforced, and what would the OPP do, and how would that change, and how would that affect resources, okay? Because the town's gonna have to do more than they are there now, okay? The police normally write the tickets, the OPP won't write the bylaw tickets. They'll provide information, okay? So we need to know at what frequency, how much time that may take up somebody's time.
Yeah, I mean, we know animal control is off now,
Yeah.
a lot of other things, yeah, okay, I'll save what else for later.
And I don't think there's a major deal there, but I think we need to confirm that we're on the right track.
Do we have a number right now for hours? Like
No.
for our police?
No, that's what I'm saying, we have to get it.
For bylaw enforcement.
No, they just, you'll probably give us, my guess is it'll be just the number of bylaws and which
Right.
bylaws they've enforced.
Okay.
I had asked for that at one of the meetings we had fairly recently. I think we were looking at the stuff from our radio POAs. Like, we don't know what all these bylaws, or was it in our own, we've got bylaw infractions, like, we don't know what they are.
Well,
Or how much the penalties are, whatever.
but we get whatever we can.
If,
Yeah.
tell us.
Governance, okay, there's some changes coming, and one of the things we need to do is learn what those changes are. Things are in a flux there. There is a labor conference where someone's going to do a presentation of that, and a couple of people from the Police Services Board may go down there, and we may have a little bit more. But we also need to get, I believe we need to get a little bit of input as to the effectiveness of governance with Section 10 boards, okay? There's some differences, and we need to talk to some of these boards to find out whether or not they're getting real meaningful input into the policing in their communities. We just need to confirm that.
Yeah, we had that in our information package, we got
Yeah.
the two different,
Yeah.
131, is it? The-
Yeah, Section 31 and Section 10.
10, yeah, and I mean, you look at it, there's similarities, but I think you
Yeah.
need to have it.
We
broken
just
down
need,
into one.
we just need to do some homework in that area and have some discussion on that. We need to look at how the OPP will affect the dispatching services of fire, police, and ambulance.
See what
Look
other
at what's coming down the
municipalities
pike in NG 911. We already talked about the station hours. But we need to look at how that would interface with they would interface with the schools. One thing that the police does there now is the police department does there now is they supply security for the hospital for mental health issues, okay? People that have mental health issues, and it also requires the security. The community gets paid for that, okay? And often that's done on overtime from the police department. But we have to find out what would the OPP do, and we could still go with reimbursement. This arrangement, I think, helps the hospital because they don't have to hire full-time security, and they just pay for it when they need it there. And the Espanola Police will often provide that at overtime, and we get reimbursed for it. But we need some information on how often, how much, and a discussion with the OPP in that area.
One point here, Bill, probably to bring in is, that I have down is, this would be a good time to mention that we probably need to direct that our fire chief, present information on what the dispatch options are for our fire department. That should be a job easily, no, it may not be easily, but it's certainly a job would be his job to do. Other communities have switched from their own dispatches, and obviously they've done something. And let's have our fire chief get involved there. And I think, we need to the police board's really the one who has to answer the questions about the out-of-town contracts that we do. Ambulance, I'm not at all concerned about, because that'll just go through North Bay and be switched to ambulance
Sure,
dispatch
sure.
anyway. So some of this may actually wind up getting answered at the second OPP presentation.
That's true. I'm just trying to identify
Yeah.
things that,
Well, when Bob is saying, like, get our fire chief involved for dispatching the police.
Well-
We got, and that's true what you're saying, Bob, but we also have to worry about the ambulance.
No, we don't have to worry about the ambulance. That's nothing to do with us.
Somebody call 911.
Well, they're gonna get
happens
North Bay, and North Bay will do it with our people
They'll do
do.
everything for 911?
Yeah,
yeah, everything
maybe
for
they'll do the fire.
911, and what happens is, if it's ambulance, they push a button, it goes to the ambulance dispatch, and that's almost what we already do.
Won't they do that for fire then?
yeah,
That
that's
would be
what
what will happen, but we have to commission a fire dispatch.
Oh, yeah.
And that's, so my
That'll be
suggestion is
different.
simply the fire chief,
That'll be
do
a little bit
that.
of a cost to it.
He's got the contacts, he will know what, and then he can present council with or the options committee with a list of suggestions.
I also had some questions relating,
Excuse me,
sorry.
Sorry if I could just add to
Yeah.
that point for fire dispatch. It was just within the last 2 years that the police service board started charging internally the fire department.
Yeah.
So we got a quote at that time from Northern Communications in Sudbury.
Okay.
So there's 2 dispatches, primary and secondary. So primary, then we could get the OCP to do that, and then they would call, if they wanted fire, they would hit a transfer button to Northern Communications, for example, and they would do the dispatch for fire. So, I mean, there are other organizations that might do that, but that's basically how it's
But you
gonna
know
work.
one for sure.
I don't think you need a whole presentation really to
Yep.
explain that process.
No.
Yeah, and that's something for our fire chief.
And
Yeah.
and the cost is already built into the fire department.
That's great.
Perfect.
I had some questions relating to dispatch, okay, but we don't have to go into those in detail. But we do have some contracts, and we should review what the implications are for that. And whether or not, if we look at dispatch, fire dispatch, we already are doing it for a group of communities around us, maybe we want to include that in as one of the possibilities. Okay, and then I had a list of additional information that we may want to have from the OPP. We may want to go to the OPP for policing satisfaction surveys to get a more detailed list of questions that were asked. I like to, I have a number of more detailed questions relative to the arrangement that they had there. When they come back to do something else, I'd like to ask a few of those questions. We need to have a presentation on post-transition costing. And Cynthia is well aware of that there, because we need to review that and make sure the community understands how that works, and everybody on the council does. Contact people from, we could ask the OPP if we need to, or if we're going out to other communities to ask questions about their satisfaction, their policing, or detailed questions. We can maybe ask the OPP for some contact people that they could provide. We need to bring the OPP back to talk about the facilities, what we have in the facilities. And we may want to even go to the OPP for pre and post OPP crime statistics for some communities if we decide we want to ask for that. I guess that's about all I had. I had a couple of other items there. We want to have a discussion on what to put on the website, but that doesn't have to happen tonight. Cynthia, after she looks at some of these things, may decide she wants to push some things off to the Policing Options Committee. That'll probably be for stuff like foot patrols, bylaw infractions. We'll have to probably use the Policing Options Committee to get some of that information. And maybe comments on governance, okay, if we collect more information there.
Do we know when the OPP is coming back for the second presentation yet?
Well, they
They
can't,
said it wouldn't be too far away, but
they can't really come back until we have done our exercise with the,
questions.
not just with the questions. We can ask a lot of questions, and if you've watched any of the other presentations in the communities, there's lots of questions. They will come back, I expect, when we've used their program and generated the year 4 forward costs based on the new costing formula that they use. That's when I think they would anticipate. We have to do our end to get them back here sooner.
And it may very well be that they come in and do one thing on facilities. If Cynthia runs through the projections on the cost. It might be good to have them come in to talk about how it's done, and here's the result of it at some point in time.
Yeah. Like, I had a couple other things too left over,
Sure.
Bill. Well, we need to fairly quickly determine without anything fanfare, what the, exactly they want, and they did mention they would send somebody upon request to demonstrate to us exactly what they want done to this building of ours over here for upgrade, so that we can at least get a reasonable estimate, because that's part of our transition costs. I'm sure there'll be a well-researched estimate on the severance costs, including the pensions. I believe we allowed for something this year in the budget, didn't we, on that? Okay.
For an estimate, yeah.
Yeah, for the pension, on the pension end, yeah, okay. And the grants. I mean, I don't quite know who we verify what grants will be available to us or not available to us if we switch.
Yeah, we should verify that.
I would expect that the OPP or even the police board could determine that.
It would be probably best, but you can look at other communities, and that it does affect, I don't think it affects our grants to any great extent, but
Well, they've dropped the Safe Communities grant now,
Yeah.
so that one's gone anyway, so we don't even have to ask about that
Yeah.
A
one.
little more. They did say, and I think it was you, your worship, that asked that night about the grants. And they did say they do all the applications and do everything to try to get.
They did, but we have to know which ones
Which ones
are available.
Did we lose any by changing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that applies as well to court security. Anyway, I think the police board's just as easy as anybody else to answer that.
yeah.
To be honest. And the other thing was, this might apply, I don't know if he'd do it in public or even if he'd even do it. Do we want the inspector to come back and make a short presentation, because there's been a change now with we're no longer part of Sudbury District, we are now, whatever they're gonna call it, Algoma, Manitoulin, or heaven knows what, being supervised by an inspector out of Little Current. That residents might be concerned a little bit about that. I don't think they need to be, but do we want the inspector to come back, and will he come back even in public and make a brief presentation on how they anticipate, if Espanola is part of the detachment, covering us with the new area? I don't know. I have a good idea how, but I think that's something residents need to hear from them, not me.
Well, I had some questions in that area too, like community service and evaluation of how well they're manned up, okay? They're gonna give us, they're committing to the same number of hours of man-years of service for the community on the initial contract. But when you look at things like relief and maintaining a certain type of size force for the area, I had some questions about whether or not the community services officer would ever, I don't believe there's enough work for them to just do school and community service. So my suspicion is they probably relieve some of the officers when they're not doing that. I had just some general questions in that area.
Actually, I did ask about that too after the meeting. It was clarified. Yeah, he's
Certified.
he's for the entire area, but he certainly is not fully loaded up. So he's available as an officer as needed.
Yeah.
And in actual fact, and which means we don't pay the full cost of him, even though he's built into the transition contract entirely. And the same applies actually to the two detectives that they're listing as Espanola. They won't be just Espanola, and therefore, in actual fact, even though they're entirely billed in a transition contract, there'll be an adjustment at the end of the year for the time they serve in the entire detachment area.
And I was wondering exactly who works out of this office and what they're gonna be doing there, so we understand that. I think I know, but I'm not sure.
Well, as I read it, again, I asked that question too, and it'd be the sergeant, the
Detective.
there's one detective per shift, the detective and the community services officer and the court officer and the administrative
Okay.
person.
He said.
So, but I mean, they can clarify that.
Yeah.
But he did say that every one of those
he
people in
would.
there is 100% qualified to
Yeah.
Yeah,
go out on the
Yeah.
community and serve
yeah,
the same as any other officer.
Yeah, instantly too.
Yeah.
yeah,
So, they're there for instant response, just as our sergeant is here.
yeah.
So, okay. So what do we want to send to the police options committee? And what order do we want things in? Is that not a fair question at this stage?
Well, I think anything relating to, for the policing options committee, there, things relating to, the hours, information on the hours of operation. And I don't know if we go directly to the police services board, or that should go to policing's option committee, and we have all the people there who can get that information.
We'd have to go back and check the terms of reference for the policing options committee, but a big part of that was just getting the information needed for the OPP. And then the
Yeah.
second component of that was just sort of around communications. So, I mean, they can gather more information, but it's really gonna come back to myself or the police chief to do anything. So
Yeah.
whether you wanna go through them or,
I don't know, that was why I threw the question out.
What do you think is the most effective way to do it?
I guess it depends on what you want exactly.
Well, do we agree, for example, that one of the priorities has to be, if not the biggest one, is to use the program that's provided so that we can project our costs? Until we do that, that should be the first thing we do, because from year four forward, pardon me, we need to know what that is, and if it doesn't look like anything, then why spend a lot of time doing anything else? We need to know if we're justified to continue. We can certainly do the rough work ahead of time, but I think priority has to be to let's get
That's
the
when you
program
fall
together.
under- That's when you fall under the police costing.
Excuse me, yes.
And,
I think that has to be the priority.
Okay,
Personally.
call that number one then? Is that a good
I think so, because,
Then we can go with number two is satisfaction. There's
Yep.
a lot of that stuff is available if we just ask for it or
Yep.
dig it up. And,
I think what you said, Bill, is those two items are the most important to the community
Yeah.
anyway.
And I think you
And
can-
satisfaction.
sorry, I think you can lump the crime stats in with, as a subheading under satisfaction.
Yeah.
Because it's part of it.
yeah,
And we can ask about response times, but you and I know, for sure know the answer they're gonna give to that one.
yeah.
It's a fair answer, but it's not.
But the
people don't like
survey,
it.
but that question's asked in the surveys.
Yeah.
Provincial surveys, maybe even the sub-surveys that go with that, so we'll get answers to that. I know they specifically asked the question, are you satisfied with the response time to violent crime? And that's typical of every OPP survey they do, at least for the province. I'm not sure about when they do the ones for each OPP area, whether or not they ask that question. They may, in some cases, I believe they ask some other questions, because they're already getting feedback on the other, but I'm not sure about that.
You said all those surveys are available anyway.
There's a number available. You can get the provincial survey from the OPP and the questions that they ask. If you want to get OPP surveys from specific areas, we may have to ask the OPP for them. They're done. It should be readily available.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
No, that's something we can ask them. But,
Yeah.
and I mean, we have two police board members here who can certainly indicate what we've discussed tonight in terms of the information we would like, but I've seen the reports from out of the police station. Most of the information is readily available.
Yeah.
Foot patrol hours and hours over at the hospital and stuff, and I think a lot of that's just gonna have to be verified
Yeah.
by the OPP.
Yeah.
And that will come in their second presentation, the one that they make with public and take public questions.
Yeah. The future policing, the police services board could probably maybe put together something on that, okay? Or policing options committee, however we want to do that, okay? But we can collect some information on policing trends. We're already getting information on policing trends, and and maybe comment on what those challenges might be for us.
And then there's the issue of, you had it down there, so did I, do we want to enlist, I can't remember how you exactly worded it, but do we want to get a consultant? And I know we budgeted for one. Most communities have taken one. It's proven to be quite helpful.
I put down under other, do we need any additional resources to
That's it.
support this
That's where you
effort?
had it.
Okay,
Where would we look at doing that after we get some more numbers here?
Yep.
or there might be some things that Cynthia looks at and says, that's gonna take a lot of time and effort. Maybe we can
Get somebody in to do it,
pay to have some of that
do
done.
research.
Yeah,
Yeah, we did include the town, we did include money in this year's budget for that. Police Option Committee have reviewed that and talked about it. And they would have come to council with a recommendation at some point in time, yes or no, so. Bill's
we
covered
leave
it. I
that
think
up
it just
to-
needs to be mentioned that is an option that,
and we can leave that up to Cynthia's
Yeah.
discretion, is that fair?
yep.
Then you'll come back to us?
To be honest, no, I'll leave that till another
I
time.
was thinking if she needs it,
Do
got a
Yeah.
budget for it, let's
Do it.
Yeah.
do it there,
Well, yeah,
okay?
if it's gonna slow down the process.
That's
we don't
right.
want that
That's
That's
exactly,
right.
there's a little bit more to it than that, but we'll save that.
Yeah, 6 months.
Okay, and that's all I have there, okay?
I think you covered it well, but I'd like to thank you for your work.
So have we missed anything, Cynthia, in terms of the order and what we need to do?
I don't think so, you're directing me, so.
Well, no, have we missed anything? And have we set anything, any targets here that we can't, that are unachievable or are gonna take too
Yeah,
long?
no, and I've already, I'm well underway on the calculation part of it, so, but, I mean, the big unknown is the facilities cost,
Yeah.
right? And I already have a consultant looking at the pension transfer costs and that kind of thing, so it's really just a matter of getting it all back.
Yeah, I know they indicated that they would send a facilities person down here, right smartly,
Yes.
on request.
Have you
And,
asked for that?
I have, I asked that night.
Okay.
And, yeah, it's been ongoing. So hopefully.
Poke the lion again.
It could be next Thursday or the Thursday after.
Oh, okay, so well, there we go, so that's fine, it's happening.
And anything we're asking you, it doesn't preclude you to put in something else, okay?
Yeah.
Something in addition, okay? You may have had some
Okay.
other things in mind, okay?
Can we go in and do
I
it?
just
Or
wanted,
miss-
from council standpoint, if we're gonna come to a decision, and some of us felt that having some of this information is critical for our decision, we didn't wanna wait till the end to ask for that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to give council that opportunity as well, because I don't want to do this report and then, you know, at the end, somebody said, well, I wish I had had this, so this is
Yeah,
the
okay.
opportunity for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll emphasize again about the questions, guys, that send them in to Cynthia by Friday, and she will dispatch them to the OPP. And we've agreed that they'll be put on the website, and, damn, I lost my train of thought, excuse me.
I've got a list of questions from other
Yep.
communities there, if you want that.
I think that's great.
Thanks. So
They don't all apply to us, but,
Like I said, I, that's what I used to base mine, and then some for Espanola.
I also just printed out a couple of handouts from the OPP website. So one, there was a question about property counts and what was included and not included. So there's definitions
some-
of that. And then the Ontario Provincial Police, the billing model overview as well.
You got it, please? I don't have this one, but I have that.
And
one for one.
I did ask about them coming back to do a presentation on the billing model overview, but she said, because we're not into that yet,
take it, yeah.
it would really just be like an information session, that wouldn't look like for a public meeting, which
No.
they had otherwise. But, so I don't know whether council wants them to come, because it would just be them telling council, or explaining the billing model to them. And
To be honest, that's the way they started out doing this process when they started, and they changed. If you watch the videos from the different communities, they did change, and they don't do that anymore, and it is not really very helpful.
Yeah.
It is more helpful when you have the actual numbers.
And we were here when they did that in Erin as well, so I mean, they have done it for us.
Yeah. It just really is just a confusing document without our own numbers attached to it. So it's honestly not worth it.
Okay.
At least that's my opinion.
All right, gentlemen, is that the end of discussion for tonight? The special meeting of council is hereby adjourned at 7:15. All in favor? Carried.